Yo, what's happening, guys? How you doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel, and today I know it seems crazy, but I want to talk about Pokemon. So obviously most of the people who will watch this video will be pretty familiar with the fact that I am not a Pokemon fan, I'm not a Pokemon player, I am not well-knowledged or well-versed in the series or the lore or the cartoon or the games at all. So this is kind of right here in the beginning of this video, my chance to give maybe newcomers to the channel or to this video a chance to opt out, so to speak. If you just don't want to hear anyone who doesn't absolutely know everything about Pokemon and love everything about it and just devour all of the stuff that happens in the Pokemon world, if you don't want to hear anything from someone with that perspective, then this video might not be for you. But for the rest of you, and also for myself, I thought it would be really fun and interesting as a non-fan to explore what's happening right now with the release of the Let's Go Pokemon games. Like I said, for those of you who don't want to give a non-fan even like a second of your time, I get how this might not be something interesting to you, but I happen to think that there is value in something like this where a big release comes out. It's in a huge, well-established, very popular franchise. Happens to be for my favorite company's console and my favorite console on the market. And as a non-fan, I think that it's interesting to talk about that from that perspective. And I would think for maybe a lot of you guys who are big Pokemon fans, hopefully you'll find it interesting to hear a non-fan talk about it as well. That's kind of the purpose of this video. And beyond that, an experiment, so to speak, because I wanted to find out, with the release of this really controversial and very divisive, Pokemon release, I guess, or two releases, I wanted to find out how people who are the Pokemon diehards, who do devour all of the lore and the games and the cartoons and the stickers and the t-shirts and the hats, I wanted to find out how all of you guys are receiving this game. So, Pokemon Let's Go, or Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, these are the games that we're talking about, another dual Pokemon release for the Switch, the first true Pokemon games on the Switch. As a non-fan who does still follow Nintendo and video games very closely, I'll discuss a little bit of what I know. So I'll set the precedence here of what my knowledge as a non-fan is about these games so you guys have an understanding of kind of where I'm coming from and where this will go when I kind of talk about my experiment, which was really just a question on Twitter. It's not a deep experiment. But yeah, so Let's Go Pokemon, Pikachu, and Eevee. These games, from what I gather, and also why they're divisive for Pokemon fans, apparently these games are a remake of Pokemon Yellow. I learned this way late in the game. This was probably like 2 or 3 weeks. This came across me either in a video I made, somebody like in a comment section I think said it in one of my videos, or it could have been on Twitter, but I'm pretty sure it was just a comment on YouTube. And it was like, oh, whoa, okay, so the Pokemon Let's Go stuff is a remake. It's like not a remaster, I guess. I mean, I guess a full-fledged remake. And so that was news to me. And I find that very interesting because I can't really tell how these games are remakes of Pokemon Yellow, but apparently that's the case. And again, anything I get wrong here, by the way, guys, you guys can yell at me in the comments and that's fine. I'm just doing the best I can. I didn't want to do all the Google searches. I'm just talking off the cuff as the gamer and the person that I am. And so it's hard for me to picture how it's a remake of Yellow, or maybe it's a remake of Yellow and Blue and Red, I think, was the original 3 games that came out on the Game Boy. And so maybe it's a remake of all of those or a combination, but I've only heard the color yellow. So apparently they're a remake of the Pokemon Yellow game, and apparently they're also very, very simple. That's what has a lot of people on different sides of the fence from what they expect from a Pokemon game, and for this game to come out and I guess have very simple RPG mechanics, not a lot of story, maybe not a lot of level progression or experience points. I also understand it to be some sort of element from Pokemon Go, the mobile game, being incorporated into kind of a more traditional game on a traditional console, the Switch. And so it's this weird melding of like normal Pokemon games, but also Pokemon Go as a mobile experience. And because I don't really understand the mechanics of all things Pokemon, I can't really talk too much about that. It just seems like Pokemon Go is very simple. A normal Pokemon game is quite a bit more complex. That is a real, true, story-centric and RPG-centric RPG game. And I guess when you combine those two, you just distill it into something really weird and simple, and something that I guess a lot of Pokemon fans just don't really like the idea of. Now, of course, there's also the dual release aspect, which, to my knowledge, I think every Pokemon release, with the exception of the spin-off games that have come out over the years, but every, mainline Pokemon release, going back to the Game Boy, has released with like 2 or 3 games at a time. Usually 2, I think. And, you know, from what I understand, I don't really 100% know why that is. You get blue and you get red. And you get leaf green and soul silver, or whatever you do. You know, those kinds of X and Y, black and white, sun and moon. Here we are with Pikachu and Eevee. And from what I kind of understand, I think it's different Pokemon are included with each one, and you can like connect your games to trade them, or you can trade them with your friends. If you've got the blue one and they've got the green one, then you guys can like switch them and stuff like that. So again, if I'm wrong, feel free to yell at me. It's okay. I'm just talking about what I know. So that seems to be what's happening. It's another dual release with Pikachu and Eevee. And so all of those reasons are what I understand to be very controversial in the Pokemon community and in the diehard Pokemon fan section of the internet. And for a lot of you guys who I know love Pokemon and are very invested in the series and invested in these games, whether you are invested in them being good and buying them, or you're invested in them being terrible and just avoiding them completely. And so as a non-fan, I have discussed, I think 2 previous times, Pokemon is a series and these Let's Go games, because there's been so much movement with Pokemon this year, including the announcement of the next core game next year in 2019. And that's going to be really interesting to watch play out. I might even try to do a podcast with some Pokemon experts after that game's revealed, kind of really get a feel for what's going on there. But as far as the Let's Go games, I did want to, like I said, conduct an experiment with Pokemon fans now that these games released, because there was so much vitriol, so much hatred thrown towards these games from the Pokemon community when they were revealed, but there were also a lot of people defending it, and I thought that was interesting as well. And I discussed on my couple previous Pokemon videos and even some live stream Q&As and stuff that, to me, I just view these as an outsider looking in. I've just viewed them as a spin-off games. And I think that seems really harmless. And I think it's even less harmless because they also announced the next core RPG game that all Pokemon fans would want anyway. It's like, imagine if when Metroid Prime Federation Force was revealed in 2015, the trailer that broke the internet and everyone hated Nintendo and hated that game. Imagine if immediately after that trailer, they also showed that 40-second teaser from Metroid Prime 4. And they said, it's coming down the road, we'll tell you more soon. Tell me I'm wrong, that would have quelled 99% of the hatred. People would have been like, that Federation Force looks dumb, but who cares, because Metroid Prime 4, we're excited. And that exact thing is literally what they did with Pokemon. They announced the Pokemon Let's Go games. People think they look stupid, but it's okay, because the real game you want is coming only a year from now. I mean, that's pretty awesome when you think about it. So on Twitter, I asked you guys, as Pokemon fans, I was like, hey, like, what do we think of this? I'll pull up my tweet so you guys can see the tweet that I sent. I said, so it's pretty well documented that I'm not a Pokemon fan or player of the games, but I'm still very curious to know, how is everyone liking the game so far? Yay, nay, would love to hear from you. And I thought that this would be interesting to hear what you guys had to say, because I can't give an opinion. I can't talk about it in depth and compare it to previous games or expectations, or compare it to what I expect in next year's game. But you guys can. And so, because people were so mad about it on launch day, this tweet was only sent out on launch day, so people only had so many hours with the game. But I wanted to kind of share with you guys some of what people said. You know, I've got a small audience, I guess, on Twitter. You know, I've got almost 2,000 people that follow me, but a lot of Pokemon fans. So I picked out most of the responses, and this is kind of what people had to say. We'll just run through a bunch of these tweets here kind of really fast. You can see this first person here, Agent Dad 21, you know, save your money and wait for a real Pokemon game, they said. And I mentioned how, you know, I'm not going to buy it. I was just curious what people think. And they said it wouldn't be so bad if they didn't strip out battling wild Pokemon. So that's interesting. That's kind of a negative response. Somebody who's not really interested in it. Didn't give an indication whether they're playing it or not. It could be somebody who just avoided the game outright and is talking based on their assumptions, or it could be someone who picked it up and realized that it's just not for them. I don't actually know. But that's kind of a negative response. Here's someone else. I do want to say this, Jams Gams. This guy, pretty cool guy, and I believe he's got his own YouTube channel, so you should look that up, because I think he does some cool stuff. But he had some stuff to say, you know. He said, I didn't think I was going to love it that much, since I don't like the capture mechanics in Pokemon Go. As soon as I started playing it, though, I knew I was going to love it. Outside the capturing, for me, personally, the game is amazing, so that is really positive stuff. He also went on to say, it's honestly the same old Pokemon in its purest form. Since there's no abilities or anything like that, the game is much easier. The devs put harder trainers that you have to talk to specifically to beat that give a harder time. So, you know, that's interesting. And I mean, again, I can't speak to this, but something he says here is how it's got, he doesn't like the capture mechanics in Pokemon Go. And so apparently what Pokemon Go does is somehow gameplay-wise very different to a regular Pokemon game. Probably because of the AR stuff is kind of my assumption there. So, interesting. Super positive. A fellow YouTuber, somebody who's very positive on the game. It's great. The style and animations are so pleasing. Capturing Go style is fun. Combat feels simple and a bit too easy. Overall, I'm pleased and will enjoy it. I would recommend if you're not a fan of the series. The nostalgia gives it major points. So that's pretty cool. It's interesting. He said, he or she said, I would recommend if you're not a fan of the series, and then says the nostalgia gives it major points. I mean, for myself, I don't have nostalgia, so as a non-fan of the series, I don't think that would help for me, but I mean, I'm sure that still makes sense to a lot of you guys. Positive reaction there. Here's another one. It's definitely targeted at younger audiences with how easy it is, but it's still fun and will scratch my Pokemon itch until Gen 8 comes out. So I'd say it's worth the price. Another positive response. Here's another one. Not interested in it if I can't transfer my Pokemon from the older games and I'm tired of chibi games. So apparently the graphics are chibi style compared to most Pokemon games, and to be fair, I've seen enough gameplay of the old games to know that that's true. They did go for a very chibi, big over-the-top anime kind of art style. To me, it doesn't jump out compared to most Pokemon art styles, but I do get the difference in graphics and models and stuff, and apparently not being able to transfer is a big turnoff for this person, so he or she is not into the idea. Here's another positive one. I'm having fun with it. It's a familiar while slightly different experience, which at the same time is refreshing. Pokemon has never been that difficult of a series to me when it comes to story, so the difficulty doesn't really bother me. Definitely plays a lot for nostalgia. So another positive response. Nostalgia is a big factor here. A lot of people doubling down on the simplicity of the gameplay, man. That seems to be one of the big sticking points, although people are still seeming to like it. So here's another couple kind of at one time. Love it. Brings back the best kind of memories. As a longtime Pokemon fan, I'm having a lot of fun. I really like it so far, but I don't think it's worth the full price. So somebody who doesn't really think it's necessarily worth the price of admission. Someone else saying, yay, it is easy, yes, but cannot be understated how still fun it is. It feels alive for a Pokemon game. I'd recommend it for nostalgia, family, or even just gaming couples. So mostly positive responses from people there as well. The last one I grabbed, this person says, as someone who hasn't played Pokemon since Yellow, a version, I am a yay sayer all the way. Cannot underline enough how much I enjoyed starting up the game. And I guess he picked up the Eevee version. I think he was saying, what he was trying to say in the beginning is he has an aversion to Pokemon Yellow, which means he wasn't a fan, and so he was nervous to pick up this remake of Pokemon Yellow, but now that he did, he likes it. He's a big fan of the Pokemon Let's Go Eevee game, and so there you go. So anyway, as you can see, not a very complex experiment. Like I said, it was an experiment, but it was nothing more than a question on Twitter just to gauge your guys' feelings about a brand new game, and that's the majority of the responses. You know, that's a lot of what people had to say. It sums up the general vibe. Like I said, a couple of negative responses, but nothing outright mean or hate-filled or vitriolic. It was just some people who are like, it's not for me, it's kind of simple or dumb. But everyone else pretty much is positive on it. I mean, again, it comes down to, it's very simple as far as gameplay for sure, but it plays on nostalgia, it's great for family, and it's still a lot of fun. Someone even said it's scratching their itch until the game comes out next year. And I have to say, interesting, you know? I mean, I also should say that I basically predicted this, even as a non-fan. In one of my previous Pokemon videos, I was like, you know, I know what's going to happen here. Everyone who knows and loves Pokemon is very upset. They think the Let's Go games look dumb. They're a big mistake. Why do these exist? It's not what I want. But as soon as these games come out, I bet most of those people, not all, but most of those people will end up picking up the games anyway and probably end up enjoying them. And most of the people who buy the games will probably end up liking them. And again, I don't cover the widest swath of gamers, but in the tiny little subsection I carve out from a lot of the people who responded, the overall reception is positive. It seems like Pokemon fans, most of you guys out there, again, for my audience, seem to be fans, and you guys are liking the Pokemon Let's Go games. So maybe they weren't the worst games to make. They weren't the worst things for Nintendo to release. A nice, simple sort of hors d'oeuvre. Something to just whet your appetite for the real experience coming next year. And I have to say, even though I'm not invested in Pokemon, I have to appreciate that Nintendo did this right. They gave you guys a simple game that they knew wouldn't really scratch the itch the way it was supposed to, but they also knew what you would want. They knew what gamers in the audience would want and crave, and they knew they had to give it to them, and they did. You guys are getting the actual Pokemon game that you want next year. Just like for me, I'm getting the Metroid Prime 4 game I can't wait for. It's coming soon, and that's all I care about. It makes the wait so worth it just knowing it exists. And I'd have to think for a lot of Pokemon fans, whether they were into the idea of Let's Go or not, they're probably pretty happy to have something to play that is a Pokemon experience. It's available on the Switch, so they're playing on their TV, or they're playing portable like they're used to, so you got a whole new way to play Pokemon that you're not really used to doing. And I mean, again, my opinion doesn't really count here, but I have to say, doesn't that count? I mean, isn't that great that Nintendo gave this to fans of Pokemon? I would have to think yes, but of course I need to ask you guys watching this video now, what do you think? You guys are the ones also playing the games. Do you agree with the sentiments shared here in my experiment on Twitter? Do you disagree with them? Did you decide to pick up the game? Has your opinion changed? Has your opinion improved? Has your negative worry been confirmed now that you've played it? Whatever. I mean, I want to hear you guys talk about the Pokemon Let's Go thing. Everything about it, from your initial thoughts to whether you've now played it, and if your opinion is the same, changed, or reinforced. Whatever it is, man, I think it's a really curious thing, and it was one of the last two big releases for the Switch this year. There hasn't been a lot of great first-party support for the Switch in 2018. Here we get Pokemon Let's Go just a couple of weeks before Smash, and that's it. So these games are a big deal. They really just are a big deal, even from a business perspective. So talk about it below, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hopefully you enjoyed this non-fans perspective and experiment in chat. I really enjoy talking about it, even though I don't know Pokemon other than the Pikachus and the Charmanders and all that stuff. And yeah, so that's it for me. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Ro2R Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.